Welcome to the Schools That Can National Forum. I'm today's moderator. My name is Justin Aglio, Executive Director of the Readiness Institute of Penn State, a Penn State Outreach Initiative. And special thanks to Michael Drunkman of Schools That Can and Carol Wooten, Schools That Can Pittsburgh, for this opportunity to talk about this very important topic, emotional wellness post-pandemic and here to stay. I am thrilled to be here with our amazing talented all-star panel of national experts, and I will introduce them, but let them take a minute or so to further introduce themselves of what they're up to, what their role is, why this topic of emotional wellness is so important to them. And I'm going to start first with Brian Cuban. Welcome and thank you so
Justin.
much. Brian's a mental health advocate, and Brian, welcome, and please tell us what you've been up to.
Well, I've been, most of my time is spent sharing my experience, strength, and hope in my long-term recovery from addiction and other mental health issues with people around the country, and breaking stigma and letting them know that recovery is possible.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Brian. We appreciate you being here today. And next, I'm going to introduce Lindsay Covert of TEAMology. Welcome, Lindsay.
Hi, Justin. Good to be here. So I founder and CEO of a company known as TEAMology. I am a lifelong educator, so that's where my roots are. But we are simplifying, strengthening, and supporting kids' social, emotional, and mental wellness through technology. So looking forward to talking more with everyone here.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. Welcome. And next, Silver McDonald of Hazel Health.
Thank you, Justin. My name is Silver McDonald. I'm the Vice President of Growth with Hazel Health. And I was lucky enough to meet Justin back when I was previously with Lego Education, bringing really great hands-on programs to students all across the country. Here at Hazel, and what I'm doing day to day is talking with districts all across the country to help them put together a program to help their students both with physical and mental health care and get immediate access to services so we can get children off of these long wait lists and get them into care and support.
Thank you, Silver. Welcome. And last but not least, my former karaoke partner, Kim Smith of Digital Promise.
Good times, Justin. Good to see you again and good to be here with everyone. I'm Kimberly Smith, Chief Inclusive Innovation Officer with Digital Promise. Digital Promise is a nonprofit organization that supports school districts across the country in advancing teaching and learning, bringing researchers and entrepreneurs to the table with communities and families to transform education, and launched the Center for Inclusive Innovation 2 years ago. And we'll share a little bit more about that work, but thank you for inviting me into this space today.
Oh, thank you so much. And everyone, welcome so much. And people listening to this, if they want to drop questions in the chat, we can answer those as we go or wait till the end as well. But so emotional wellness, very important topic. It's, more important than ever. You hear about it more often than ever. And sometimes it's called social emotional learning. It's a close relative to that. And so, Lindsay, I'm going to ask you the first question for the audience listening. What is emotional wellness? Let's get that out of the way. What is emotional wellness? And sometimes you hear social emotional learning as a close relative to it or called that. Just kind of go down that pathway and explain to the audience and people listening so they can understand, have some background. What is emotional wellness and why is it so important?
Sure. So I am going to actually define this, Justin, today using CASEL, which is the Collaborative Academic Social Emotional Learning. It's a collaborative, it's the nation's leading organization to advance SEL. So they define SEL as a process kids and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage their emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. So we simply, we kind of simplify that when we're chatting with folks and say, it's just really important for kids and adults to understand their own emotions and, of course, learn to deal with them in healthy ways, because that's going to impact their relationships and their success in the future.
Wow, that's pretty important skills to have and to have. And when we talk about post-pandemic, I know I have 3 children, high school, middle school, and elementary school. And my son's in 3rd grade. And when he was in kindergarten, it was a half-day kindergarten. Then 1st grade, a pandemic happened, so he missed half the school year. 2nd grade, he was off and on during the school year. So this is really his 1st year in school, full year as a 3rd grader. And talk about emotional wellness and social emotional learning and learning those skills necessary to go along the way. And as we're here today, and as Lindsay talked about emotional wellness, social emotional learning, and understanding what it is, I'm hoping that this panel today can really shed some light on, why is this topic so important, best practices, how's technology used in this. But looking at, I guess, starting first is just talking about it, getting out and talking about it. When I was a principal, it was very seldom talked about in the classroom, your emotions, your social emotional learning. Now it's at the forefront. It's what everyone's doing right now because it's so important. And Brian, when we chatted a couple of months ago when you were at the center, I can't believe it's been that long ago.
I know.
We talked about the importance of opening up and talking about your feelings, what's going on emotionally with you, with your health. Like Lindsay said, talking about some of those skills that she just described. Why is it so important to speak out, to open up about emotional wellness?
Well, because generations take cues from generations. When, for example, I'm a boomer. Back when I was growing up in Pittsburgh, my grandmother struggled with mental health issues. We didn't talk about that. It was viewed as very shameful. My mother struggled with her mental health issues at a time when a woman was just basically forbidden by societal expectations from talking about mental health. You could, to talk about needing a drink or needing a pill, you could lose your children. And so generationally, it's been handed down as very stigmatized and very shameful. And so as I grew up and I began to struggle with my mental health issues, first as at Penn State, I struggled with bulimia and exercise bulimia, 2 different eating disorders. And then at Penn State, I struggled with alcoholism, alcohol use disorder. And then it just wasn't on campus. It wasn't talked about at that time. It was still very stigmatized, very shameful, and you didn't have any kind of outreach. And then you fast forward through law school. I went through law school as an alcoholic. And then as I went into the practice of law, I just became addicted to cocaine and struggled with major depression. And still, even going into the 90s and 2000s, it was still very stigmatized. And what happens is the adults take their cues from society. Society views it as shameful. I'm going to view it as shameful. And so I may not even knowingly send the signals to my children to view it as shameful. So what happens? A child struggling in the pandemic or coming out, they don't know who to talk to. They don't know where to go. And even though they may be getting signals at the school, we should talk, we should open up, they go home and they're back into the cauldron of shame. So that is why at some point you have to break the cycle, break the stigma, and it starts with the parents. And today is much different than when I was growing up. We have so many resources where if a parent doesn't understand how the cycle can be broken, you can go to people who do understand. There's no shame in not knowing. That's not where the shame comes from, right? But we have the resources and we have the facilities to break those cycles.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. I mean, you're exactly right. And again, with this topic is post-pandemic of COVID, we're seeing emotional health issues, wellness concerns across the board now of kids being at home so long. Brian talked about resources, right? You work with school districts all across the country. What are some things happening, some best practices in schools? I know that Digital Promise is leading in this space, seeing some of these best practices happening in schools, providing these resources to young people. Can you share a couple of minutes about some best practices across the country that you're experiencing, seeing firsthand?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who may not be aware, the League of Innovative Schools at Digital Promise is 125 school districts across the country in 34 states. And it's just a robust network of districts that are in this area where they're willing to kind of bring in new technologies, new programs, new systematic approaches to teaching and learning. And this topic it's probably in the top 3 of what we're needing to address right now. We have, what's been interesting with the League is we have 9 league districts that are in a 18-month SEL cohort supported by the Asia Society, where they're able to not only see models within the US, but also internationally. They're working with schools in China, Surrey, British Columbia, and Australia, and being able to see models that are kind of global, if you will. Some of the best practices that are emerging from this work range from very deep and broad systemic initiatives around wellness. So Compton Unified School District out in California has 7 district campuses that have wellness centers that are embedded within the schools that are supervised by clinical social workers and social work interns, as well as students. And so this is a district that is taking a systemic approach to creating very robust spaces for wellness within the school building itself, which is really powerful. We also see out at San Diego, the Department of Education there has a network of counselors, school counselors, because they're serving 400,000 students in San Diego. They're trying to figure out, how do you bring these adults together that are supporting students? And they even have a conference called Counselor Con, right, where they are hosting these counselors and enabling them and providing supports around emotional wellness. And then a couple other pieces. There's programmatic pieces. The Ruler program is very strong in El Segundo Unified. They've been working with the Ruler program out of Stanford for 4 years, and they are seeing some pretty tremendous work and outcomes in supporting students. There's a lot of wraparound programs where districts are partnering with community organizations such as Mind Peace in the state of Ohio. These are organizations that are bringing together multiple community-based organizations in alignment with districts and essentially extending the district's capacity to support student wellness. And the last thing I'll mention, Justin, is around teacher professional development and the adults, right, that are working with our kids every day and providing social emotional support. There are book studies that are happening and all sorts of other ways in which teachers can basically go offline, either with each other or on their own, to be supported through services and peer-to-peer engagement. So that's just a top line of what's happening with the League right now.
Oh, what are amazing, tremendous examples. I was a principal for 10 years. And if I had those resources as a principal, I may have hair on my head still. I mean, just the resources available to districts are amazing. And thanks, Kim, for sharing some of those resources. And thank you for working with those districts. And Kim, you talked about schools working with community partners, and they can't do this alone sometimes. And I know Silver, that's what you do. You work with school districts, your organization, you provide those resources, not just to students, but to families as well, because Brian, you talked about this. It starts in the house. It starts in the home. And, you know, the kids are going to school and schools can only do so much. So I know getting resources in the home is also very important. So Silver, what are some things that you and your organization are doing to provide those resources to school districts, and school districts that want to do more? How can they do more?
Absolutely. Thank you, Justin. We provide both physical and mental health services to students, both in school and at home. And some of that was driven by COVID and needing access. We're also really specifically focused on the most underserved families. And so dismantling any social determinants of health that would be in the way of getting high quality healthcare, because we want children to be able to be present in class and present in mind so that they can be learning. So part of what we do is we work with our school districts to build out, basically extend what could be resolved in the nurse's office on the physical health side. We have a really great referral program for children that do need additional support in going through assessments, screening. We work with our districts to map out all of their local partners, their mental health partners and physical health partners, and then basically go through, mild, moderate, severe, how is the child doing and what should those workflows be? And really the long-term goal is that the child is always ultimately being seen with a mental health partner within the local community. But unfortunately, right now, everyone is backlogged. And so we were able to come in, set up services, get them immediate access to care, resolve many issues in just 6 to 8 sessions. And if they do need long-term care, then work really closely with the local partners to have that in place. And that's all done in partnership with the school district, the counselors, et cetera.
So if I'm a school district and I say, hey, this sounds amazing, like how do you start? And what's the process look like?
Yeah, it's honestly a fairly quick process. We work with the district. We go through we go through orientation with the different stakeholders. So the nurses, the counselors, ensure everyone's aware of the program. We are able to quickly load just some very core demographic data or student data, and we're up and running within just probably about 8 weeks at the high end. So we're also available over the summer, which is unusual. And so a lot of districts right now are racing to get up so they can have it available for the students in the home environment over the summer. But it's a really quick process. We provide all the equipment, we do all the setup, we do all the training. And we also do special programs based upon district needs. So with San Bernardino here in California, we're doing wellness checks for their children and doing call outs. Other districts have asked us to put together things like BMI programs or asthma education programs or whatever it might be. So we really want to localize to what's needed for that particular district and the families that they serve.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And Kim, I'm sure you'll talk, your districts are thinking about the summertime as well as it's coming up here soon. We're back to school, we're getting resources and everything's working well. Here comes the summertime. And that's something else I'm sure a lot of school districts are thinking about. And when Silver was back at Lego, she was president of Lego Education North America. And I worked with her a lot on using Legos in the school building for creativity. But one of the benefits from Legos within our building was the fact that we are able to do our counseling sessions within those Lego spaces to make kids feel comfortable in that space so they can open up. And I know kids right now, yes, they still play with Legos, but they also play with a lot of technology. My kids don't talk to me anymore in the morning. They talk to Alexa in the morning. They say, Justin, forget you, Dad. Good morning, Alexa. How's the weather? All that stuff. And Lindsay, I know that you and your organization, TEAMology, are really doing some breakthrough things with technology. And how can technology work together with professionals to meet emotional wellness, social emotional learning needs for kids today, and explain what we can do using technology?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Justin. And I just want to lead with how important it is to have face-to-face human engagement for kids. But I think we're living in times where we don't have the capacity, as Silver was mentioning, in terms of meeting all of the social, emotional, and mental health needs of kids today. The other interesting kind of statistic that I'm always careful about sharing is that there was an event with some superintendents a few months back where they shared some data that basically indicated that there was a discrepancy between how comfortable educators thought kids were approaching and speaking with adults versus how comfortable students felt in approaching and speaking with adults. So as an educator myself, I'd like to think that all kids at the time that I was working in public education were always comfortable coming and talking to me. But the reality is that's not always the case. So a couple of the things that we're trying to do with it, it's a brand new product. We're actually still in pilot and beta phase, but launching in January will be a platform where we have kids interacting, experiencing social, emotional, and mental health support through engagement with our research-based characters. So we do this kind of as a human plus AI approach to kind of building capacity in a school setting. Eventually, we have plans to expand that into homes. We've also had some other areas such as hospitals and that sort of thing interested in using the technology. But the important piece is that this kind of solves two problems. One, obviously the capacity issue, that we really just don't have the amount of people and experts and professionals needed to talk with kids today. But second, kids don't always feel comfortable. I mean, as a former counselor, it could take me weeks to develop a relationship where a child felt comfortable to share information that was really bothering them. And interesting enough, what we've learned over the last several years as we've been piloting this product is that 100% of the kids actually reported preferring to talk to one of our characters. Our launching character was Ruby. Over 100%. A parent-teacher, 100% of kids that have been asked have preferred talking on this platform over talking with a parent-teacher counselor.
That number sounds shocking, but in a way it's not. Like I said, I gave the example of Alexa. I mean, that's kind of the mindset right now that kids are living in right now, because they, I guess maybe you were going to go talk about that, but why is that? Because they're not judged and they're not,
yep.
I mean, what's the reason?
Yes. So so you're right on the right track, Justin. It's non-threatening environment. They don't feel any judgment. Our characters are like peers, so they present as kids. So there just tends to be a different connection. And I think, some of what we've heard over the years is that I just feel like I'm talking to a friend. We get a lot of messaging through the platform saying, thanks, Ruby, you're like my best friend. So that comfortability and that feeling of safety is really important. I think that's another piece that we aren't talking about much when we talk about all the needs of mental health issues with kids today. Just because a person is there doesn't mean a child feels comfortable or safe talking to them. So I think we have to think through that piece as well, just around, we can reach kids a lot faster when they feel that they're in an environment where they feel comfortable and safe to talk. So we're really trying to use this technology plus human approach, really trying to work with school districts and other organizations to fill that gap.
And when you work with school districts on this, what's their opinion, I guess, on incorporating this technology in their school? And like I said, as a former district leader, curriculum director, like I think of security and things like that.
Sure.
But I know you and your team are, have that at the front of the lines there. So what are school districts' thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I would say several years ago, when we were really starting to launch some of the pilot testing, there was a lot of questions around the data security and what is this, like, robots coming to take over the world kind of concern. I would say over the years, and I think even outside of education, obviously, the idea of leveraging artificial intelligence and using technology in a way we never have thought about using it before has become a lot more comfortable. At this point, I think we're really still, as you mentioned, it is pretty groundbreaking technology. We don't have a lot of other organizations to lean on or look to in terms of how they're messaging some of these kinds of new tools and products. But the reaction is really, the best reactions we get are when we put a superintendent on the platform and we have them experience the conversation with the character. And it's, that's when I think the magic seems to happen. They seem to completely understand, because if we don't do that, there are all those concerns, Justin, around, well, what is this? Are you trying to replace people or humans? And that absolutely isn't the case. It's just, really trying to help make sure that we are triaging and getting kids the support they need faster.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Kind of getting back to speaking to people, I'm going to loop back and do a follow-up question for each of you, and then we'll kind of do some closing statements. So Brian, speaking, you are pretty much doing a national tour of public speaking, and you're always on the road. And whether it's through your new book, The Ambulance Chaser, or some other forms of speaking, mental health, you're always speaking in front of people. Now I'm going to kind of give you a question here. You're speaking in front of a group of educators, and you're going back to your school days, and you're going back to those conversations that you talked about with your family and everything. And what would be some advice, some tips, some guidance that you would give to a group of school teachers, administrators, community leaders when it comes to this topic, mental wellness?
The advice, I mean, advice, I don't consider myself an expert to give advice, but the insight from my own personal experience I would give is that I would always want them to consider what and try to get some insight out of it, maybe not through the child, but through the parent, as to what is going on at home in terms of how the parent has been raised, in terms of how the parent views mental health, in terms of how the parent views wellness. Because if the family, and again, it's going to depend certainly on the demographic. There may not be any parents in some situations. So, but if a single parent family, or the parent or the guardian is addressing emotional health through dysfunctional behaviors, and that is how they're, whether it's through alcohol, whether it's through opiates or some other substance, if they are addressing it in those unhealthy ways, it's going to be almost impossible to pass down any kind of healthy groundwork to the child. So they're probably doing that already, but that when I talk to college students, when I talk to a lot of law students, there is a strong correlation of what's going on in the home and how they were raised to view mental health, and how they were raised and how they viewed their parents in terms of dealing with stress and other environmental factors through unhealthy ways.
That's so true. I always said as a principal that as teachers, administrators, we could influence our students or learners as much as possible, but the people they live with are their strongest influencers. And you said that very well. And this panel is making it too easy for me, because that leads to kind of a next follow-up question.
Well,
go ahead, Brian. Yes.
Also, Lindsay brought up a great point. There are going to be a lot of families. It depends on the demographic. There are a lot of underserved demographics. There are a lot of demographics where it is just, you have a lot of broken families, and there may not be any figures like that, which is why the AI, the way they're using AI, is just incredible, because that may be the only outlet.
Yeah, that's 100%. And Kim and Silver, something about working with families. Kim, obviously, the center you work with on equity, and to Brian's point, yeah, there are families, some two-parent families that, one-parent families, or whatever the case may be. There's so many different scenarios where kids and families don't have the resources, and schools are looking at it through maybe one lens. And I know, Silver, when you work with families with different culture backgrounds, that's a whole other category. So for Kim and Silver, I'm going to ask the same question and let you both respond to it. When you look at, like Brian was talking about, the family dynamics, cultural dynamics, equity, and you factor mental wellness into that, that's a huge mountain to climb. Kim and Silver, I guess I'll start with Kim. What are those things that you're seeing in school districts, things that your organization is working on to address those cultural equity issues happening through families and school districts as well? I mean, some school districts have tremendous resources, some not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, so with the center and the work we're doing around inclusive innovation, which is this idea that, families and students should be at the table in imagining the solutions to the challenges that they're facing. I can't overemphasize the power of community in this work. I think that even in places and spaces that are really challenging in terms of high poverty circumstances, you will find some deep community within those places and spaces, right? And children that have relationships with extended family that are just out in the communities if their parents are, unable, they don't have the capacity to support. So in our work with the center, we're doing a powerful project with Bristol Township and Bristol Cares outside of Philadelphia, where the students are at the table and co-designing the supports that they need in that community with the school district.
So the students have this equal, or not more of a voice than adults, which
yes, awesome. Yes. And we tout this notion and hold up this idea of context expertise. You are an expert because you are living and breathing this challenge every single day. And so our focus is really on that student voice, but students as designers, students as solution creators in this work. And we believe that that's one way to look at maybe the ideas shouldn't come from adults, honestly, as we think about where there are opportunities to support our kids.
Kim, I can't help think, going back to what Brian said about generational differences and, kids telling adults what they need. I mean, I could never, 20, 30, 40 years ago, that sentence probably never even came out of someone's mouth before.
Right.
Right. I mean, from the adult's perspective, I mean, that's a huge shift in how we think and everything. And I just, are adults being trained in this mindset and coached in this way, or are you trying to find those special people to do this? I mean, this is a huge shift.
It is. And kind of the dynamics within the school district, right? And how do you make room and get out of the way, basically, to allow student voice and the expression of students and their ideas and their solutions to come to rise to the top. And in Bristol Township, we had a set of focus groups with 40 students in the room, and hearing what they're saying, it's very humbling, right? And also it heartbreaking, but on the other side of that, as the students want to be on the side of like co-designing, where there are doorways and light that can be shined on what they need. And so it's been really powerful, Justin, because the leaders, the superintendents are kind of taking a step back, and the district leaders and saying, you know what, I may not know how to get there. They probably know how to get there more than I do.
That's you don't hear that too often. Superintendents stepping back and saying, I don't know this. Silver, kind of the same thing. I mean, you said you work with a lot of families and different cultures. We look at diversity as a strength. I'm sure your organization is learning a ton when you're in the houses working with the families. What are some cultural experiences that you're learning from this process on how to address mental health?
Absolutely. Kim, I love everything you just shared as well, so thank you. One of the things that we've done really purposely within Hazel Health is that we mirror the student demographics. So we mirror the families that we serve. So both our providers as well as our therapists are well over 50% people of color. We put a really high premium on cultural competency, and all of our communications with the family largely are in their own native language as well. So we really work with our districts to make sure that the students feel comfortable and feel seen and feel heard. The other piece of it is that we also work with our districts when they are doing outreach to populations within their community as a whole. And so partnering with them and attending those community partner events, being present in the community as a whole with them is really good. And a last piece is that with our model, there is no financial responsibility with the family. So their children have access to physical and mental health care services, therapy visits, prescription support, whatever it might be. And because there's no financial outlay for the families, they utilize the services more for their child. So it actually helps to create more trust, to Brian's point, in an intergenerational environment where they see that their child is receiving really high quality care without the barrier of other social determinants of health, which might have otherwise made that care not possible.
Wow, that's you said something that everyone likes to hear: free.
Yeah, no cost to the families. Yes.
That's amazing. No cost to the families. That's amazing. I know, because it's a struggle, right? It's my cousin. She was a dietitian, and she used to take families grocery shopping to help them figure out how to be healthy, and how eating healthy actually helps with their emotional wellness and physical wellness. And it came down to that wasn't an option, because it was all about doing what's most cost effective. And if we know about eating, sometimes that's not something that's healthy. And I know that's important to families. Lindsay, we heard from you need to train people. We need to talk to adults. And I know you're a guidance counselor. And 5 years ago, and this is true, if a teacher had a concern about a student, they would take them to the guidance counselor and say, hey, talk to them. Now, over the last 2 years, the teacher goes to the guidance counselor and says, teach me how to talk to my students. So we're seeing a huge shift as far as guidance counselors needing teaching teachers on mental health, mental wellness, and so they could teach all their students. So what are some things that you and your organization, TEAMology, are doing? Kind of two questions. One, to teach the adults to work with the kids and families, and also, like you said, use some of the technology to help teach, to teach the adults to help use to teach to the students. So what are some things you're doing specifically working with the adults in this field of mental health and mental wellness?
Yeah, sure. So prior to the pandemic, we actually spent a lot of time talking to educators and teachers about their comfortability with social emotional learning and just generally about mental health. And as you can probably imagine, at that time, a lot of what teachers would share with us was, I don't have time. I don't have time to incorporate social emotional learning into the classroom. I don't have time. I'm not a counselor. I wasn't trained to do this. So, I mean, I can recall just spending, hours. We would sit around in circles and we'd look over the feedback. And part of our goal at that time was, how do we better equip, how do we better support our educators so that they feel more competent and comfortable? And again, that was before the pandemic and 2020 hit. So we then, through the technology, actually, well, a couple things. First, we've always, from a professional development and training standpoint, we've always highly believed in close partnership and training. So we provide coaching to our school districts that are interested in that, so that we have somebody that's constantly there to work with the districts to provide that support. But through the technology, based on that data we were receiving prior to the pandemic, we were like, how can we make a teacher feel more comfortable integrating SEL into the classroom? Because there was a disconnect that we were discovering, that when you say integrate SEL, a lot of it was, what does that mean? So we spent a lot of time having those conversations. So one of the things that we have been able to do through this platform is actually co-facilitate a social emotional lesson with a teacher. And so that does a couple of things. First of all, it takes the burden of the lesson planning off of the teacher. And then it also helps the teacher learn from the platform how to have these conversations. So basically, I'll just try and paint a quick picture for you. So we essentially, Team Talk is sits on top of about 15 years of research and development of curriculum and content around social emotional learning. So what we wanted to do then was, how do we merge these things together? How do we take the technology and use the content at the same time? And so that piece of the technology, we are actually essentially pulling the content through a lesson plan and the students are actually interacting with Ruby or one of the characters as she's teaching the lesson, but she's also talking to the teacher on, okay, next to do this, and can you tell me about this? So then the teacher's still teaching, if that makes sense. I might not be painting the picture well enough. But the goal was, and what we learned then after this 8-week pilot was, we ended up pulling all of those teachers together. They were like, wow, like this helped me feel more comfortable. And actually I did know more about social emotional learning than I thought. And I think that was for us really encouraging, because it wasn't really that they lacked the knowledge. I think it was more that they lacked the confidence, that they were actually already doing the things. But I think the pressure of it these days, I think sometimes teachers don't realize how much they are already doing around the social emotional, space.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, is that they were already doing some of those things, how they greet students and they come into classroom, when they
Right.
circled up in activities, taking turns, talking to each other, asking about their weekends, allowing them to have voice in the classroom. But they were already doing that. Now we're just kind of showcasing that, hey, this
Yes.
is important. It needs to be done, not just part of it, but
Yep.
needs to be a core component, like Kim said, a top 3 whatever you want to call it, goals of a school district in their curriculum and their program. So kudos to you and your team. So we're going to go around and just do some closing statements and an opportunity to say really anything around this topic of a mental wellness, emotional wellness, post-pandemic, and put in quotations around this, and it's here to stay, right? This isn't a fad. This is something that is not a cool technology or anything like this. Our organization, the Readiness Institute, our goal is, we understand that kids will go to colleges and careers, but our goal is to help them be successful in college and careers. And this topic, emotional wellness, is one of the topics we teach. And thanks to some of you who help us teach that. So I'm going to kind of go around and just call on you, any kind of closing statements or an opportunity, or how people can reach out to you if they're listening and say, hey, I want to learn more about that. How can I get a hold of you if you want to share that information? And just kind of going back to Kim, it's a top 3 goal for school districts. And we think about, it's here because it's an issue in schools, but we also recognize that it's not going to go away. And since we're teaching it, we see the benefit of it across all sectors of life, from personal, public, and professional. So, Brian, I'm going to toss it over to you. Any closing statements around this topic, emotional wellness, for educators, for community members, industry leaders listening to this panel discussion today on this topic and the importance of it?
Thanks, Justin. Well, and again, most of what I do focuses around addiction, right? And whether it's a teenager or an adult. And the one constant I see anecdotally, because I'm not an expert, is giving. We have to do the best we can to give kids the safest space possible, with oftentimes imperfect information, to speak their truth.
Yep.
Okay, because if they don't have that safe space to speak their truth, they may, and there's a strong correlation here, may look for ways to not have to feel, so they don't have to care about speaking it. So that would be my closing statement. Let's give kids the safest space possible to speak their truth.
Love it. Great. Thank you so much, Brian. I'll toss it over to Kim next for any closing comments you may have about this topic, emotional wellness.
Yeah, I think that, I have had a profound experience over the past couple of years with my nephew, who's just graduated college, Black male, who has anxiety challenges and has just been so open about, his experience. And I'm just so grateful. And so I just am, for me, it's part of a purpose in my life to really think about how and support students in their kind of their own agency around, where there are opportunities and where they need support. I'm going to drop in the chat, if it's okay, this program that we, I may be dropping it the wrong place, but it's called Hope Squad. This is a program that is around supporting peer-to-peer support of students that are, feeling, like they're, around life, and it's a suicide prevention program. And we saw this in Middletown City Schools a couple months ago. It was about 30 kids in high school that are supporting one another. And I just honestly believe that, that students need to be leading and helping us, support what they're leading. And so I just want to share that as something that I saw that was powerful. And the work we're doing within Digital Promise, the work we're doing in Bristol Township will be available to all districts in the fall of 2022. So we'll be sharing that with the world, what comes out of that work in Bristol Township.
Nice, thanks. Thank you so much, Kim. Silver, any closing comments around this topic?
Absolutely. One, thank you for bringing this group together. It was a really, really good discussion. I think we've all known people in our personal and professional, or known children, and seen the struggles, especially over the last few years. And one of the things that keeps me awake at night is just making sure we can support as many kids as possible, and especially before they get to a crisis stage, because there's such a lack of support for the kids who are at that stage, or the lack of resources out there, again, across therapists and everything else. And there's a huge inflow of additional kids starting to go through mild, moderate, and severe. And so finding a way to quell that inflow, as well as support the children who are already in a more advanced crisis state, is something that it's going to take all of us, and all the resources and all the love and support and leadership within our districts and families to get there. So if you want to reach me, I'm silver@hazel.co. I'll pop it in the chat as well, but would love to talk with any of our district partners or other partners out there.
Thank you so much, Silver. And Lindsay, any closing comments?
Yes, well, first I echo Silver's comment about bringing us all together. It was great to hear from Kim and Silver and Brian, and of course, talk with you, Justin. There's so much I could say, but I do want to go back to Kim's comment about student voice. I think that's amazing, the work that you're doing at Digital Promise and bringing the kids around the table, because one of the things that I always say is kids are the experts. So it's always so important for me to get into schools, actually to get into classrooms still and chat with kids about what we could be doing better to support them. So that student voice, I think, is one of the things that I feel like is important for everybody to take away from this conversation. But I think we're at a time when we're seeing a shift in the system, and the shift, I think, needed to happen. The pandemic maybe started to push us there a little bit, just in terms of shattering the stigma and really helping kids to understand what healthy means. It's not just physical health, but it's that, social, emotional, and mental health, I think, is not something that we have collectively tried to voice to kids in schools, at least from my experience. So as a mom of two little ones, I think I would love for there to just be kind of a shift in the system where we are really highlighting health in a way that maybe we haven't been doing before now. And yes, anybody who's interested in chatting would love to connect. I can put my contact information in the chat as well.
And thank you for putting all your information in. So I'm going to kind of recap what I heard today. And I'll briefly say, when I was introduced, maybe like 5 years ago, I did this keynote in Chicago, and I was introduced on stage as Justin Aglio, the futurist. And I'm thinking, I'm walking to the podium thinking, what the heck's a futurist? And why are they calling me a futurist? And so I don't want people to think I could tell the future or mind read people. So I had to come up with something. And so I got to the stage, I was trying to think about what's a futurist. And I said, to me, it's always a person who listens and supports what they hear. And if you listen and support people's dreams and what they're passionate about, yeah, I do kind of control the future a little bit, because I'll make their dreams come true. So I'm going to tell you what I heard today. And one, we need to be open. We need to talk, right? Whether it's peer-to-peer, peer to adult, whether it's child to mom or counselor or AI, we need to talk. We need to be open of how we do things. We need to have a sense of a culture of belonging to do that. We also heard some best practices, things happening in school districts, in communities around the country, and things are taking place. And that's exciting to hear that it is a top concern of school districts. We also heard a lot of ways that organizations are supporting this. So teachers, organizations are not alone. They have support services to reach out and say, hey, we're here to help you. You don't need to be the experts. Like Kim said, that superintendent saying, I'm not the expert in this. I'm so glad to hear that, because sometimes people have to be the experts of everything. Well, in this case, they're not. So, and also heard that new innovative ways of addressing emotional wellness. So so kudos to all of you. In just 50 minutes or so, 1 hour, I just felt like I learned a lot. And if there's any ways I could support you or you could support each other moving forward, please reach out. And if anyone listening to this webinar today wants to reach out, I think everyone put their information and contact in the chat. Please reach out. That's how we will get through this, is by working together as a team, and only through a team, and through sharing best practices, by listening to each other, collaborating, because we can't do it alone. So we have to preach or do what we preach, right? We have to talk. So reach out, communicate with each other. And I cannot be more thankful than the 4 of you joining us today on the Schools That Can National Forum Conference. Thank you again, Schools That Can, for allowing these amazing experts to shed their voice on everyone. And thank you, Michael Drunkman of Schools That Can and Carol Wooden, Schools That Can Pittsburgh, for giving us this opportunity. We truly appreciate it.